of weather from Maria coming up today.
We do.
Yeah.
Right.
Another cold
Chilling.
one.
And I'll tell you what, it was really chilling in the White House yesterday. It has to be, although the response from the White House was diplomatic, all except for defending Vice President Biden's integrity and track record. When Secretary of Defense Gates wrote this book, cut this book deal, many people thought, well, he's a calm guy who's very even-tempered. How explosive can this book be? Well, he may have looked calm on the outside, but judging by his biography and his account from his 2 years with Bush and 2 years with Obama, he was seething on the inside, especially during the Obama years.
He expressed that he didn't feel as though the president trusted him or had confidence in him, and he also felt as though the president was taking credit and determined to do so. He said, quote, "The controlling nature of the Obama White House and its determination to take credit for every good thing that happened while giving none to the career folks in the trenches who had actually done the work offended Secretary Clinton as much as it did me."
And in fact, at one meeting in the Oval Office back in 2011, Gates was so incensed at the White House micromanagers. And Mr. Gates writes that from day one, it was all about getting reelected. So everything, whether it was domestic or international or national security issues, it all went through the White House, which was new. In fact, it all went through people like Valerie Jarrett. She was involved. Axelrod was involved, and also the press secretary, Robert Gibbs. Extraordinarily, they all had a say in national affairs. Meanwhile, here is one thing that he said about the president taking credit, the controlling nature of the president in the White House. You already read that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yes.
But
no, you had to read it.
Honestly,
though, you have to read it again.
Too.
Because
Steve,
it's shocking that this is actually
it's
written.
Crazy. The controlling nature of the White House.
You know, essentially, Bob Woodward writes a review of the book in the Wall Street Journal. Robert Gates in the Washington Post. Robert Gates writes his own review of his own book to give a brief synopsis in the Wall Street Journal. And I would say that in the President of the United States, he seems to characterize somebody he's relatively ambivalent about, whose leadership is lacking many areas, but has absolutely no trust in our nation's military officers. In the men and women that fight, perhaps. In the strategy that he actually endorses publicly, no way. Now, here's something I thought is really going to haunt Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. When she was Senator Hillary Clinton, she was questioning David Petraeus. And as you may recall, Senator Hillary Clinton was not for the surge publicly. She says it would not work. Here is her questioning and condescending comments to David Petraeus as he talked about the positive changes in Iraq in 2007 as the surge is beginning to take root. Listen.
I think that the reports that you provide to us really require the willing suspension of disbelief.
Really? Meanwhile, on the surface, it seemed that the senator thought the surge in the war in Iraq was a huge mistake. Well, it turns out it was all politics.
Right. He was giving the report, as you said, and she was demanding some answer on behalf, of the American people, specifically asking Petraeus at the time in 2007, would you continue to hold troops there in this location if nothing seems to change? And he then shot back at her saying, look, you're asking a hypothetical question here. So there was obviously tension there in the report. And this is what he had to say about the relationship and what was revealed between Senator Clinton at the time and President Obama. Senator Obama. Hillary told the president that her opposition to the 2007 surge in Iraq had been political because she was facing him in the Iowa primary. The president conceded vaguely that the opposition to the Iraq surge had been political. To hear the two of them making these admissions and in front of me was as surprising as it was dismaying.
Hashtag stunning for Gates to say that the president sent American troops to war for political reasons, with not really having any confidence in the plan
in Afghanistan
or the willingness to complete it, is absolutely extraordinary. And what's unusual about this particular memoir, which is called Duty, it's extraordinary not only for a cabinet member, a former cabinet member, let alone a former defense secretary, but for a book like this to come out with a sitting president. It's extraordinary. And when you talk about how controlling the White House, for the fact that we are all talking about what the dysfunction at the White House, they got to be growing a gray hair today.
The national security team was calling military officers on policy and procedure. At what time the Secretary of Defense, who, by the way, served in every administration outside the Clinton administration in various capacities, from the CIA to Secretary of Defense, from both Bushes to Reagan to Nixon, came out and says, listen, the next time somebody calls you like Tom Donilon, you just tell them to call my office. And the vice president as well pulled him aside and started telling him what to do. He said, listen, you're not even in my chain of command. Right. It seems like chaos with an inexperienced staff trying to manage two wars to benefit somebody politically, and a president who talked himself into a corner to get elected about the good war in Afghanistan, who did not believe in his fiber and his being, in the strategy that he endorsed, in the troops that he sent to war, and the war that he actually thought that he could win. And David Petraeus actually said, I'm not comfortable with you guys having a pullout date of our troops. That's not the way you do this surge in Afghanistan. At which time the president sits down with his officers and excoriates them and says, how dare you sell me out to the press? I paraphrase of Secretary of Defense Gates's words and feelings in this meetings.
He said, if you're gaming me.
Right.
Yes.
Here's the deal. I cannot believe Secretary Gates, who was begged to stay on for this administration, did not speak up more to the president. And behind closed doors in his book. Why did he wait till now?
Well, he's worked for every president since Nixon, right, with the exception of Clinton.
Right.
I mean, another point, though, is that we've seen a number of high-ranking officials in the military let go, moved around, demoted. Okay, so there's been long suspicion there that there's a great divide between the commander-in-chief and those that he is indeed commanding. Not good timing at all for this book to come out with the approval ratings of the president matching the temperatures across the nation. So it explains why he's sort of going on this class warfare tour across the nation as well, right? Explaining that, look, extending unemployment benefits will actually help the country. It'll help the economy. This is what he was saying yesterday.
Independent economists have shown that extending emergency unemployment insurance actually helps the economy, actually creates new jobs. When folks like Catherine have a little more to spend to turn up the heat in her house or buy a few extra groceries, that means more spending with businesses in her local community, which in turn may inspire that business to hire one more person, maybe Kathy. Voting for unemployment insurance helps people and creates jobs, and voting against it does not.
Okay, really? And that's a preview of exactly what the White House is going to be talking about throughout the coming year, right up to the next election. Now, they're all concerned about the next election for so many members of Congress and the Senate as well, where they're talking about income inequality. Right now, they want to get this minimum, or they're also on the back burner as a minimum wage, and they want to get the unemployment passed. It did pass an important hurdle yesterday in the Senate. However, and there's the unemployment rate right now at 7%. Rudy Giuliani says you don't really create jobs with unemployment insurance, though.
I'm getting really annoyed at this concept of progressive. There's absolutely nothing progressive in this class warfare stuff. It's retrogressive. Every single policy that they're talking about is a policy that has failed several times historically, going back 130, 140 years. We're talking about basically Marxist ideas. We saw them used in Eastern Europe. We saw them used in Asia. We saw them used. I took over a city that was a disaster. First thing I did was lower taxes, not raise taxes. Next thing I did is require people on welfare to work. I said, if you want your welfare check, you have to work. And I said to them, I'm doing it for your good.
How many people got off welfare?
The amount of people I took off welfare? How about 500 to 600,000?
And so here's the thing. Why the president does not believe in trickle-down economics. If you cut taxes, maybe those companies would hire people. He can't understand that. But he can understand you tax people, take that money and give it to other people who don't have a job. It's illogical. It's not the way our system's built to work. That's not the tone that he took yesterday. Condescending to anyone who thought that continuing to extend unemployment benefits past 99 weeks is heartless.
Yeah, there's a thumbs down in terms of the president's math on a lot of fronts, and this is certainly one of them. In other news, you saw what the IRS did to conservatives, and now they've got a new plan to regulate political groups. Just wait until you hear this. It's next.